Welcome to Spotlight on Seniors. My name is Steve Raymond. Today I am happy to welcome Kandyce Powell, Executive Director of the Maine Hospice Council and the Center for End of Life, to the show today, and she's going to be talking to us about hospice and palliative care and something called physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment. Kandyce has been essentially a lifelong activist improving end-of-life care in Maine. And Kandyce, it is so great to meet you. Thank you for being here to help shine a spotlight on hospice and palliative care.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here, and always a pleasure to talk about these issues.
Thank you. So let's just dive right into it. First of all, everybody at this point has heard of hospice care and palliative care.
Right.
Let's start it right at square one, right at the beginning. Let's give our viewers an overview of what hospice and palliative care is, and then we'll talk about your council.
Sure. In a nutshell, really, palliative care is a part of hospice care, but hospice care is not part of palliative care necessarily. And it's easier for people to understand it that way, I think, because the basic tenets of hospice are the basic tenets of palliative care.
All right.
Quality versus quantity, that quality of life is as important as quantity of life, that the care is approached from a team perspective, because the issues that people are dealing with advanced chronic illness and a serious life-threatening illness are complex, and they benefit from many heads coming together to thoughtfully put together perspectives that might enhance the care plan for any individual and family. Bereavement care is central to palliative care and certainly central to hospice care. And being allowed to stay in something that's core to both of those, except sometimes we aren't able to see that play out in the real world.
And by venue, you mean whether in a hospital or in your own home?
Or a long-term care facility.
Yes. You know, you started talking about the very core essence of hospice being about quality of care. You know what I've always wished? I've always wished that there was a medical test for quality of care and gave a scientific indicator to those who aren't so sensitive to that particular issue.
Yeah.
Here's quality and here's not.
That's right.
Tell me something. Some people seem to think, okay, if you're dead, you're dead. There is such a thing as a good death, isn't there?
Well, you know, when I hear that, it brings up a lot of things for me. You know, I've been in this field for 30-some years. And what we don't want people to think is that there's one way to do anything.
Yes.
Dying is very personal, even though the body knows how to shut down. It's the care that's offered to enhance the quality of someone's life and preserve the dignity of someone's life that's so very, very important. And that sometimes results in either a death that didn't go so well because suffering wasn't relieved, or a death that was more peaceful. But a lot of that work is the work of the individual. You know, many of us who have been involved in this field, when we have the privilege to spend time with someone at the end of their life, and time is really of the essence in healthcare in general. Although the way our system is reimbursed, it doesn't afford the kind of time always that people really need. Someone to just listen to them. And people bring a lot of existential issues with them to the end of their life. Issues that are burdensome, that they've carried with them for years, that they haven't resolved. And to have someone who is present for them, who listens carefully to them, who helps tease out some of those things in a way that's healing and therapeutic for that individual. I mean, there's no greater gift that anyone can give.
Oh, I agree. That's such a beautiful part of hospice that people don't appreciate.
Absolutely.
Being professionals, I had always wondered how I would deal with a death close to me.
Right.
And when I saw my father's death, and when hospice became evolved, and what a calming influence they had, not just on my father, but on the whole family, because they provided care for the whole family, and he was in a long-term care facility, and it just made everything so much easier. And he had a good 8 8 weeks or so of hospice, time enough for him to tease out the stories and to enter his death in a much more graceful way, putting things to rest that had hurt him his whole life.
Absolutely.
And when you see that, to me, that's the essence of a good death, really, when someone really gets to resolve the things that they've carried, and
Absolutely.
now they want to leave in a more comfortable way.
Absolutely. That what greater gift can you offer someone than the gift of your time and not judgmental presence? Yeah.
Yes, very much so. So there's the very heart level of hospice, and then there's the very practical. We operate within a healthcare system, and sometimes that creates maybe challenges. Would you care to talk about what's most on your mind in terms of the challenges, especially from Maine citizens? You're very involved. Let me just say, you're a constant activist. You never stop. You're always educating. You're always teaching, and very much to the benefit of our state.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what's most on your mind right now? Let us know what's going on for you.
Sure. Well, so many things, really, on so many fronts, be it policy fronts, be it, clinical fronts, be it preserving the philosophy of hospice, which is really the heart and soul of why hospice was created in the first place, and having it survive all the structural challenges that we've seen over the years. Even with Congress looking at the Medicare hospice line item in the federal budget and saying, oh, we got to do something about it. It's growing too fast. And I say, let's pause and think about that, because of course the research shows that hospice care is cost effective, helping people stay at home, providing the comfort and care, educating loved ones or whoever that network of family is critical to the quality of life for someone. And actually, it's cost effective to the healthcare system. And yet, when anyone sits down with members of Congress, we have a wonderful delegation in Maine that has always been extremely supportive of hospice care. But I must admit, it's very frustrating sometimes to know that it's a cost-effective way to approach health care. There are so many tenets of hospice care that actually, as you and I were speaking, could be sold back up the healthcare system because they're just core ways to treat people when they're ill. And so some of us see that.
It makes not just heart sense, but financial sense.
It does. It's cost effective. It provides high quality care. Family satisfaction surveys are usually right over the top when it comes to hospice care, if folks are referred early enough for that support to really play out with patients and families. So
patients referred early enough. What do you consider to be early enough in, say, the average, most cases?
Sure. Well, I'm going to preface my true short answer to that question by saying the earlier someone is referred to hospice, as long as they qualify and are appropriate, because there are guidelines. And, once reimbursement came into the picture, Medicare hospice is sort of the gold standard, the guidelines. It says 6 months or less to live. There's nothing magical about that. But when the research was done before the benefit was passed by Congress, they found that 6 months or less, we know most of the Medicare money is spent in the last 6 months of someone's life, usually in the last couple weeks of someone's life. So if we could provide the kind of caring and humanity to people who are dying, incorporate all the tenets of palliative care and do it in a cost-effective way, that's a win-win situation for everyone. But yet there's still a lot of people that use it more of a political football, and don't really take the research that's been shown to prove that hospice is cost-effective and embrace it.
Well, I guess this is a personal thing for me. End-of-life care, the essence of it is somehow about helping people open up their hearts and minds to what's coming next in life, which at that time is something we all face. It's death. And this conversation has been, or I've been engaged in this conversation for 35 years, wanting to see consciousness in our society expand, because I believe ultimately it's that fear of death that drives people to hang on to what turns into a false promise promised by technological medicine. And so people end up dying kind of difficult deaths sometimes in intensive care units.
They do.
And at great expense, as you were just talking
Often.
about. So when you visit with someone and you want to talk to them about advance directives, how do you enter the conversation with someone who may have fears?
Oh, you know, one of the things that I and others, many other people who enjoy having thoughtful conversations with folks, appreciate is the opportunity to do just that, to have some time to sit down thoughtfully, respectfully, totally being present for someone and hear what they have to say. You know, I've never found any difficult conversation, as some people might frame it, like end-of-life care is, difficult at all. It's sad sometimes because you're talking with family and you're talking with individuals who are ill about parting, about leaving one another. And it's the grieving that really, really is the difficult aspect of this. What am I going to do when they're not here anymore? And some folks don't want to leave. They don't think people will be able to take care of themselves. I've heard husbands say that to wives, and wives say that to husbands, and children and parents talk about that. And very often, speaking of children, children will be the ones to help their parents get through the situation if the child is ill and dying. So is it difficult to have a conversation? Not for some of us. Is it sad? Always. Because you're dealing with a lot of emotion. But you know, conversations are enduring. And I think once you sit down with someone, I had a colleague, and I had a close friend of mine who wanted as her birthday present a conversation about advance directives. We went out to dinner, sat down, had the advance directives spread out on the table, had dinner, dessert, a glass of wine. I helped her fill out her advance directive, and she said that's what she wanted for her birthday present. A lovely gift for both of us, for both of us. And, you know, people who have a sensitivity and a love for humanity and a presence for other people probably won't find it difficult at all. And if we had more conversations to explore issues that were near and dear to all of us, you know, that's one way people can stay in control of their life. And they can bring those wishes to the forefront, and they can share them with their physician, they can share them with their healthcare team, and they can prepare them for knowing the value system of that individual and what they really, really want and embrace at the end of their life. Lots of times fear prevents us from listening to that, though, unfortunately.
Well, fear prevents us from listening, but it's people who have that sensitivity that you describe, it's rare that people actually don't respond to that, and because people have something that, generally speaking, that they want to talk about, but if the system's just grinding on around them, they get lost in it.
Absolutely.
So let's throw out to define for people to understand. So advance directives, durable medical power of attorney,
right,
and pulsed.
Correct.
Let's kind of
parse that all out.
Go into that and parse it out.
Yeah. Advance directives can be made out by anyone, and actually, you don't need to have it notarized. They can be made out. You need maybe a couple witnesses, but it shares. There are 14 pages of an advance directive. It's in state statute.
It's on your website.
It's on our website. Yeah. Anybody can make it out, and that's to tell their family, their friends, their loved ones, their physician, their attorney, anybody, what their wishes are should they find themselves dealing with an end-of-life situation.
Yes. And generally, it's not someone who's immediately facing a terminal illness.
No.
It might be, but you do it long in advance. It's just,
I think
I have one.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. I think sometimes it should be a rite of passage when everybody turns 18,
Huh.
that they fill out their first advance directive, you know.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. And if it became more commonplace, I don't think the conversation would be so difficult. But we save it until oftentimes we're dealing with the stress of an illness or a
Yes.
difficult situation.
Yes.
And that's, you heap that discussion on top of someone who's under a lot of stress, and it's not a very good combination. So if we used it more as a dinner table conversation, if you will, I mean, and it became more routine for our society. But these conversations are not routine for our society. Some folks avoid them at all costs. So, yeah,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yes, that's true. I'm sure
Yeah.
if we could wave the magic wand and dispel that fear and allow people to
Right.
engage, it would be transformative of our society.
It
for
would.
people to be able to
It
do
would, yeah.
that. So durable medical power of attorney.
Yes.
How about that?
Yes, and that you can identify in the advance directive form is someone whom you would trust the most to make decisions about your health care should you be unable to make those decisions for yourself. And you know, a lot of folks say, well, it should be, if they're married, say, well, it should be my spouse, or if they have a partner, it should be my partner. Or if they don't have either, then if it should be my child. And I say, let's talk about that. Because the criteria should be, is it someone whom you trust a lot, who knows you better than anybody else you can imagine, who is a respectful but fierce advocate, who knows a bit about the healthcare system and how to navigate it, ideally, who is a good problem solver, and who is great at communicating, because you're going to be working with lots of players.
Yes.
And those are the qualities that people should really consider before they appoint someone as a durable medical power of attorney. That's a critical role. And they need to have the conversation with someone, and they need to ask that person if they feel comfortable in that role, because you don't want somebody in that role that's not completely comfortable. And you might say, well, it's easy to say that on a Tuesday when everybody's relatively well. It's another thing when you're in an illness situation and someone has to step up and make decisions. And there's no guarantees for anybody at any time about how people are going to react. But if you have conversations with people that you think might be the person that you would, in thinking about it, be so comfortable knowing they were there to back you up, should you not be able to make those decisions, then hopefully, if you know that person well enough and they know you well enough, they will say yes in a heartbeat. Yeah.
Yes, right.
But you should also have a second and third choice as well, because of course, life happens when we're making plans and something could happen to that individual.
Right.
But then you need to tell your family if it's not a family member. And when I'm talking about family, I'm not just talking about biological family. I'm talking about, as everyone in hospice does, about that support network that someone has. That's our hospice's interpretation of family.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate, these two documents do not require an attorney.
Right, and you can actually identify your durable medical power of attorney in your advance directive. It's part of that advance directive.
Part of that. And what I was reflecting on is that a physician that I know in Monterey County did a study of all the advance directives there, and by far they had been filled out by attorneys during estate planning sorts of client relationships. And the realization was that while that leaves people who are cannot afford attorneys out of it, but an advance directive is for everyone.
It is.
And it doesn't have to cost you anything.
It doesn't.
Okay.
It shouldn't cost you anything.
Yes, it shouldn't. shouldn't. I wanted to highlight
No,
that.
if someone says it costs something, then I would encourage them to talk to somebody else because it should not cost anything.
Well, and we're going to have your website information up on the screen.
Great.
People will be able to find your website,
Great.
so they'll find it.
Great.
And so now, pulsed.
Yes.
Physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment.
Right.
And I know you're deeply involved in bringing that to the state and educating people and professionals. Tell us about pulsed.
Oh, yes. Pulsed is an enhancement to advanced directives, if you will. And pulsed, very simply, is an actionable medical order. So it takes the wishes in an advanced directive and it actually captures them not in advance of an illness, but because of an illness.
Yes.
That is the immediate need for a document when someone is ill, either dealing with medical frailty, advanced chronic illness, and or a life-limiting illness, then a pulsed conversation should be considered. And if someone, the question really is, should be asked by all, if they're considering pulsed, would I be surprised? And also, if one is considering referring to hospice, would I be surprised if my patient died within the next year? And if the answer to that question is no, I wouldn't be surprised, then two things should enter a healthcare professional's mind. One, that they should make sure that hospice is one of many resources that are available to that family should they choose to ask for them. And then the second thing is that maybe a pulsed conversation would be appropriate. So, yeah, those are the triggers, really. And then there are many elements of a pulsed form that need to have thoughtful discussions. And that discussion in filling out a pulsed form can be had by social worker, nurse, you know, so, and the document has to be signed. It's a medical order, so, but it can be signed by a physician, an MD, a DO, an advanced practice nurse, and a PA. Yeah.
And so is this something that patients should count on their physician bringing to them, or should they be able to take the initiative to ask their physician?
Sure, that's a great question. And if they're aware of it, as most things regarding end-of-life resources, they could mention it to their physician, that they understand there's a medical order form. It's called pulsed. And it's an enhancement to advanced directives. And the question maybe that they could say to their physician or their healthcare team is, would this be appropriate for me at this time in my life?
Yes. So the workshops that you're doing around the state now, how would you gauge the current state of implementation of pulsed in Maine right now?
Sure. We have a pulsed coalition that involves many, many people in the state. We have conference calls monthly. The coalition offered Maine as a suggestion for an administrative home for pulsed because we're a neutral entity. So the Maine Hospice Council became the administrative home for pulsed in the state. And we've done some very ambitious work with our partners, many of them who have just given a lot of time and energy to pulse, physicians, nurses, you know, CNAs, anybody's invited to be part of the conversation, but social workers are key to this. And so we discuss the challenges of implementing pulsed. We have embarked on our first endorsement committee call, and I think Maine is going to become the 17th endorsed state by the National Pulse Paradigm. Yes, and I want to say too, and thank publicly, all of the people that have gone before, if you will, they may not be involved now, but many of them still are. Many of the folks that joined the coalition initially are still involved with the coalition. And this has been the success of Pulse in Maine, and it's still in its infancy, adolescence, if you will, but really I think healthcare professionals are finding it the next best step to honoring patient wishes.
Oh, yes. Is it becoming part of people's electronic medical records that will travel with them?
Yes, it is.
That's
Yes,
what's
it
happening
is.
right now.
Yes, it is. And hopefully we will be developing a registry. We have been discussing with Health InfoNet, which is a wonderful organization that has the infrastructure for a future registry. We don't believe in using money inappropriately or duplicating efforts in the state. And Health InfoNet is interested in talking to the coalition and the Maine Hospice Council about a future registry for POLST, and that would be a big, big help. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Anything else you want us to know about POLST right now?
That anybody is welcome to give us a call and join the Pulse Coalition efforts. And we are embarking on our second Train the Trainer workshop, and that will be at the Rumford Hospital on August 7th. Yeah.
Rumford, August 7th.
Yes.
So, and so you're welcoming in professionals, and are lay people also good volunteers for this role, or it really needs to be a professional role?
Well, lay people certainly need to come and be educated, but this is a Train the Trainer program, and it's
Train the Trainer.
Yes,
Right,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. The first one we did was in Bangor at Eastern Maine Healthcare. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Are you finding primary care physicians, I know especially primary care, they're under so much pressure themselves, reimbursement pressure, time
Absolutely,
pressure.
absolutely.
How are they responding to trying to work with POLST with their patients?
Well, you know, I think certainly anything takes a while. Pulse is a small social movement in regard to advanced care planning. I mean,
Yes.
those are my words, nobody else's. And anything takes time to catch on. Physicians have so much on their plate. But I think they're finding Pulse actually a benefit to them, having this conversation or having someone on their team have this conversation with patients and families. Conversations, as terrified as some people are of them, and it really, not everyone is a good conversationalist. Not everyone is able to just be present for someone completely and unabashedly in the time it takes to really, really have a therapeutic conversation. But there's usually some people on a team that are. So I think physicians are realizing the value of that because it enhances the care plan. It gives them so much more insight into who someone is. Yeah.
But there's an advisory council that's being formed right now that's multidisciplinary.
It is.
And I know that it's a volunteer, so there's no taxation to the state budget.
Correct.
But it's passionate people like you who are coming together to try to improve services in rural areas and improve it throughout the state.
Right. Actually, it's a palliative care quality of life advisory council, and it was the bill was written by the American Cancer Society. It was LD 782, passed out of committee unanimously to pass, and American Cancer Society asked the Maine Hospice Council to be the convener of the advisory council.
Kandyce, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your service to the state.
Thank you.
It truly is service.
My pleasure.
Once again, thank you from Spotlight on Seniors.